EB-5 visa was a program that Congress passed in order to stimulate the U.S. economy and create jobs. It's been around since 1990, but it was seldom used, and the regulations were very difficult to understand. So it wasn't until 2007 that the program started coming into its own. The EB-5's been responsible now for over $3.3 billion in economic investment, and it's created over 42,000 jobs, and that was in 2012. The program every year has increased in popularity. It's one of the few immigration programs in the United States that Congress has given wide support to. It's now widely recognized by Congress as a great economic stimulus for neighborhoods all around the country. It's producing hotels, residences, commercial buildings, office buildings, and it's very, very widely accepted in Congress that it's here to stay. So last year, what was significant is the program was temporary, and now the program is permanent. It gives 10,000 visas to people who can basically invest at least $1 million, and at times $500,000 to create 10 jobs per investor. What do you get? What do you get if you put up $500,000 into the U.S. economy? Well, the benefit is that you get a green card. A green card basically means that you have lawful permanent residence in the United States. This is different from for residency for tax purposes. Residency allows your family, your wife, your children under 21 to come live in the United States without any restriction whatsoever. There's no geographic restriction, and there's no employment restriction. So if you do an EB-5 and you invest in a project in California, you can live in Miami. It's no problem. You're not tied to any particular employer, so you're free, basically, to live how you want to live. There's no restrictions when you come into the airport. You're not going to get placed in a little room and interrogated. So that's good. Green card gives you all the benefits of a U.S. citizen except the right to vote. What's important that I've noticed for people who have kids that are under 21, they want to plan for their children's future. They want to place them in universities. When you have U.S. residents, there's significant savings on tuition. It's almost cutting your tuition bill in half. There's also a very important tax, what's called a homestead exemption. It's an exemption it caps your property tax at 2% a year. So that's also very important that you're eligible for a homestead exemption. The other point I want to make is once you get your residency through EB-5, you're eligible for citizenship within 5 years. If you marry a U.S. citizen, you're eligible in 3 years. That's a punishment. It could be. Marriage could be a punishment. Your marriage could be a punishment. Okay. Let's talk about some other options. Most people, if they want to come and they're not familiar with the U.S., they want to come and live temporarily. There's a number of work-based visas that for years have been very accessible and easy to use. Lately, in the last 2 years, the U.S. government has been very concerned about fraud, and they've stepped up. They've taxed basically immigration applications a $500 assessment to hire a lot of fraud officers. And this has resulted in much tougher adjudications in almost every visa category. So whereas before it was a given that you would get an initial L visa, for example, now it's getting much more difficult. So you just have to prepare well and make sure you follow the rules when you apply. There's also an E2 visa, but which is an investor visa it's a 5-year visa for non-immigrants. There's no minimum requirement of the investment, but it requires a bilateral treaty, and unfortunately, there's no treaty between the U.S. and Brazil. So you're out of luck there unless you're married to, your spouse is covered under a different treaty. So for example, if your spouse is Italian, you're eligible for an E2 visa. So just recognize that that's a possible option. Let's get into the EB-5 now. There's 2 different programs for EB-5. One is a traditional program that is much more active. It requires an active investment of at least $1 million, and at times $500,000 if the property that you're investing in or the business you're investing in is in a high unemployment area, which basically means that the unemployment in that area is 150% above the national average. You need to create 10 direct jobs per every $500,000 invested. That's a direct job would mean that you're hiring someone for at least 35 hours per week who is work eligible and not a family member. In contrast, you have what are called the regional center option. The regional centers were an idea that you could pool, that the government advocated, where you could pool investor money together into a limited partnership, and that investment pool would be invested in much larger projects. This type of investment is much more passive. It's basically putting your money in making your investment into a limited partnership and letting an experienced developer invest that money to create jobs. The biggest difference between these two is the ease of which they count job creation under the regional center. Under the regional center program, you are entitled to take credit for not only direct jobs, but also what are called indirect and induced jobs. So there's an economic formula that's provided in each application, which is basically used when you, for investment. So for every dollar invested, there's indirect jobs that are created. And so it's much easier using the regional center. In fact, over 90% of EB-5s that are used today are used through the regional center option. I'm going to give you illustrations of both so you understand the difference. And if you have any questions, we're going to ask questions at the end, and I'll be available after. It's a lot to cover in 20 minutes. And Octavio has these green cards, and he's staring at me. Okay, this is a project that is completed and built. It's a direct EB-5 project that I was involved with. It was a $2.5 million investment, and we had, of that $2.5 million, we had 3 direct EB-5 investors. That means for this investment, which is already open and operating, it's right, I don't know if you know Miami, it's right across the street from the Shore Club on Collins Avenue, but it's a very nice restaurant, and we have 3 investors that have invested $500,000 each, and so the investment has to create 30 jobs. Okay. Everyone understand? Yep. Okay. Okay. So then you have the regional centers, and the regional centers have proliferated very rapidly. In 2007, there were 12 of them, and we were one of the original 12. And so we've been in the market for a long time assisting regional centers. And by current day, there's over 480 regional centers. These are developers, cities, states, counties that have gone to the government, petitioned, and said, I want to be a vehicle to safeguard the program and present projects to foreign investors. They're not all of the same quality. They vary greatly in terms of the management. They vary greatly in terms of the investment strategy, the methodology for creating jobs, the economic methodology they use. So even though they're all approved by the government, they're not all equal. And one of my responsibilities as an immigration lawyer who understands the EB-5 program is to select programs and present to my clients programs that have a high probability of success. So what you shouldn't be is scared to participate in the program, because statistically, almost 92% of applications get their conditional residency. 92%. It's the highest approval rate of any visa category in the United States. The issue, though, is who you invest with and if that investment is going to produce a green card. My job is to get you familiar with programs, regional centers that have a track record of success. And then, for example, I would refer a client to Westchester or another competent financial advisor to let them examine the investment. Okay, these are just a few of the types of projects that have been out there for a long time that have had success. This is a resort called Jay Peak that expanded greatly their ski facilities in Vermont. It was a state-sponsored project. This is a project who's a client of mine, American Life. They just completed funding for a $172 million co-branded Marriott in downtown Los Angeles. This was all EB5 capital. If you notice, there's two different basic models for regional centers. One is an equity investment for something like this hotel. Basically, the investors invested there was over 300 plus investors, and they were pro rata divided and invested in the land and the building. So that investment gives sufficient collateral or safety to the investor. So if something goes wrong, there's still a piece of land and a building behind the investment. Okay. There's also something called a debt model, which is most popular. I would say the majority of EB5 projects are debt models, which is the investors pool their money in a limited partnership, and then the limited partnership in turn loans the money to a developer. They're typically 5-year term loans, usually with 1 or 2 year extensions, with I would say very low interest rates, maybe 1 to 3%. The equity investments tend to give up higher interest rates because of the perceived risk is less. What's very important in this economic model is that you look at the collateral behind the debt model. Sometimes the debt model, say if you have a $100 million investment, there might be a $50 million loan in front of the EB5 investors. So you need to understand what the collateral is in the event you may get the green card, but in terms of return of capital, if the project isn't performing well, you could lose some money and not have enough collateral to make the loans, the investment safe. So what's important is when you're analyzing these projects to understand that there is security, and so long as there's security, your investment's very safe. This is another example of a equity project. It was a Marriott hotel in the Pioneer, in the downtown area of Seattle. This is an example of a debt project. This was a $60 million project. $30 million was a senior bank loan, and the other $30 million was all EB5 investors, and they were collateralized through the units of the hotel. There's a mechanism where you can apply, when you have a project that's viable, you can apply in advance for what's called an exemplar approval, and that means the government gives deference to the adjudication of the application. And this was such a project, and so far all of the investors have been approved. There's 3 basic steps for EB5. The whole process takes about 2.5 years to 3 years or 4 years actually, before the conditional residence is removed, and about 1 year to get the conditional residency. The first step has to do, this is all procedures now. The first step has to do with the source of funds. When you ultimately hire a lawyer and then choose a project, you're going to have it reviewed and understand it, and then sign offering documents. And once that's done, the attorney is going to put together a source of funds package, which is basically showing where that $500,000 came from. And it's very, the government isn't interested in your entire net worth. The government is only interested in that $500,000 and wants to be very confident that that $500,000 was lawfully acquired. So that money might come from a number of sources. It might come from the sale of real estate. It might come from dividends from your company. It might come from an inheritance. It might come from a life insurance policy. Whatever it is, our job as lawyers is to figure out the most convenient, transparent way and present it to the government. You also have to be able to trace the funds. So not only do you have to understand where the money came from, but you also have to show the path of the funds. A critical mistake a lot of people make is they don't distribute. If they make a dividend, for example, they don't distribute it, and they keep it in the company and then invest it. So what's important is that the money has to be provided. If there's a distribution, it has to go to you individually, and it has to be invested on your individual capacity, not through a company. Tracing the funds is a challenge, but very doable. If all goes well, you get an approval. In some cases, the approvals have come within 5 to 6 months. There's now many more applicants in the pool, so the adjudication times have taken a little longer, but the government has said they're addressing that and hiring more people, so hopefully it'll speed up again. Okay, the next step is once you have that approval notice, you need to be able to show the government that you're admissible, that you haven't committed any crimes, you haven't engaged in prostitution, you're not a drug addict, that you're basically a person worthy of coming to the United States and are admissible. So there's 2 different ways to do this. One is to apply at the embassy in Rio, and the other is to apply for adjustment of status if you're physically present in the United States. The third part of this process is after you acquire the conditional residency, there is a 2-year period where the investment needs to produce the 10 qualifying jobs per investor. And 3 months, at the 3 months, killing me with this car. You see what he did? He's flashing this at me. It's very distracting. Okay. All right. So at any rate, you have to show during this period that the investment has been sustained, and the jobs have been created. If you do that, you get the permanent residency, and then soon after, usually a year after, you can apply for citizenship. Okay? All right. Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Yes, sir. Yes. My understanding is the immigrant visa section is in Rio. That's on their website. That's been my experience. Yeah. They are open for all non-immigrant visas. My understanding is immigrant visas is in Rio. Maybe they changed their policy, but that's what the website currently says.
Hi. I have 2 quick questions. The first one, is the investment, the person who wants to immigrate, does he have to live in the States close to the investment, or I can fund, for example, investment in California and live in New York, something like this? Okay, does it have to be close, yes, or not?
So for the EB-5, it doesn't matter. If you invest in a regional center, you can live anywhere in the United States. But if you do a traditional EB-5 and you're actively managing the business, you need to be obviously where you're managing the business. Okay. Okay.
So in the second and last question, the Fortune magazine just ran a very critical yes. piece of the EB-5 program.
Yes.
Do you think it will go on, or what do you think about this?
Yes, the program has always been under criticism by some people because unfortunately, in a program that is continuing to grow, there's going to be some bad apples. And there was one bad case where the regional center basically rented the regional center to someone who was unethical and took a lot of people's money. The people ended up suing and getting their money back, but it was a bad example. But by and large, the program has been very successful, has wide support, and the positive articles far outweigh the negative one. But yeah, it was a very critical article. You should read it so you can understand some of the issues people have. What's most important is you apply with a reputable regional center, and the due diligence is done very well. In analyzing this, how do you know who is really a qualified investor? Well, it's fairly straightforward because this is a security and it's sold. There's regulations that govern it, and the regulation is to take part in the EB-5 program. You have to be what's called a qualified investor, which means you have to have at least a net worth of over $1 million, or you have to have net income over a 2-year period of at least $300,000 and $200,000 if you're married. So it's very simple, the test. I tell people you shouldn't participate in this program if you have a few $1 million, and you're going to be relying on it as liquidity. So you have to be comfortable making the investment. It is an at-risk investment, and it's very likely you'll get a tremendous result, but it's also money that could be tied up for a long time.
The question is, I identify the investor.
Mm-hmm.
I go to the consulate and just apply it.
No. You have to have competent counsel that can help that investor find the right project, at least present projects to them, an investment advisor who's going to review it for them, some tax planning. I didn't mention, because Octavio was giving me the red card, but there's a few other points that I quickly can make, Octavio. One is, if you're going to do this program and become a resident, whether it's through EB-5 or any other immigrant visa, you need to do tax planning carefully. So take your time and do your tax planning before you are a resident, not after. It's extremely important. The other issue that I wanted to tell you is if you have young children or children who are about to turn 21, the EB-5 includes them. So as long as you file the initial petition, the I-526 petition, it freezes the child's age. So if he's 20 years old and you want your family all to immigrate together, and you don't know what to do about your oldest child, there's a timing issue, and you must file the 526 before he reaches 21, or he has to find another way. Okay?
Is the same for women? Single women?
We like single women. There's no problem. What's the question? Huh?
If she is above 21, is the same if she's single?
Yes.
So the company can apply
a single person is going to qualify on their own. If they have children, they qualify also. If they have stepchildren, they qualify, so long as the step-parent relationship occurred before they were 18. It can be more difficult, but so if you wanted to invest $500,000 in a Dunkin' Donuts franchise, absolutely. So long as it's in a high unemployment area, so you get the $500,000, and you have the capital investment to do it, and you can show the source of funds and create the jobs, it works.
A few questions here. Yeah,
Yes.
3 points. First of all, I would like you to elaborate about the return on investment of the $500,000 in the debt model. There is any guarantee from the regional center?
Okay.
Any collateral?
Yes, so it's a good question. It's a very important point. Usually in the debt model, so just so you all understand what he's referring to, in the debt model, the regional center sponsors a project. The limited partners, all the foreign investors, form a limited partnership and put money into the limited partnership. Say $30 million. Okay, $500,000. The 60 investors, $500,000 each. They then loan the money to the developer. Okay. So in the project documents, there's going to be what's called a loan agreement. And in that loan agreement, it's going to specify what your collateral is and what the terms are. And so each project's going to be different. Some projects, if the equity came from the developer himself, they own the land, and they had the money, and they're robust, you might have a first mortgage on the land. That's great. But what you need to pay careful attention to is if you're behind a bank loan, how are they going to assure they're going to pay you back? Well, some regional centers, they do reserve accounts, so they take profit and they dedicate it to repayment for the investors. The basic strategy in a debt loan, in a debt model, is that they're going to, once the project's built and once the hotel is built, for example, and the property value of the hotel, of the land and the hotel therefore rise, they'll refinance the project and pay back the investors. That's the typical way you see, or they sell the asset.
The green card issue depends on the success of these investments or not?
No, it doesn't depend on the success of the investment or the rate of return. What it depends on is that the investment is sustained and the jobs were created. Two different issues. The green card is a different issue than the investment. Okay, everyone clear on that?
Ok, nós vamos para a última pergunta da senhora que estava com a mão levantada. É a mesma pergunta? Então, a
Então, esse
última
senhor
pergunta dele, aqui na frente. Ele levantou a mão primeiro. E depois o Roger vai estar à disposição ao final da palestra.
As long as you apply, you have to live there, right?
Great question. Okay, we get this situation a lot. For example, a lot of Venezuelans, for a long time, they were assessing what the government was going to do, and they made a decision to get the immigrant visa, even though they still had a very successful business in Venezuela. So the strategy is to get the immigrant visa, and then you can apply for what's called a re-entry permit. It's a 2-year permission. Even though you've immigrated, it's a 2-year permission to go abroad and live abroad. And so I have a lot of clients that are on re-entry permits, and that's the solution to that issue. It's completely legitimate and a very easy thing to do.